Third graders, I bet you're kind of thinking, wonder what that is she's holding. Well, in our first story, we'll hear about that. But first, let's start us off with a good joke. And remember, what you need to do is you just kind of hold your hand up beside your face and look like you're real smart if you think you know the answer. So here's our first joke. What is Dracula's favorite holiday? I'm trying to see you. What is Dracula's favorite holiday? It is Thanksgiving. You know, this year we're trying to do some stories about Hercules. And we didn't do them last month because I was telling you some Halloween stories. But today we have one. And this one happens long after he's done his 12 impossible tasks. And it is called Deianira, Aeschylus, and Hercules. Now, let me tell you about who these people are. King Aeneas, oh, there's another name. King Aeneas lived long, long ago on an island in Greece. And the king had a beautiful daughter, gorgeous daughter. She was known as the most beautiful daughter in the whole world. Her cheeks looked like they had been rubbed with pink rose petals. And her eyes were big and blue. It looked like the blue of the ocean that surrounded King Aeneas's island. And she had long, wavy, beautiful hair. But most important of all, she was so, so kind. Her name was Deianira. Well, as she grew older, princes from all over the world would stop by the king's place and say, I'd like to marry your daughter. Hey, could I marry your daughter? If I gave you 12 chickens, could I marry your daughter? And he kept, no. And finally he realized to do this fairly, he had to set up a contest. So he announced one day to the whole courtyard and said, my beautiful daughter Deianira is ready to wed, but the being who will wed her must defeat all her other suitors, all the other people who wanted to marry her. The games will commence in 1 week. Well, the news went out from all over the world, and she was amazed at how many people wanted to come in and marry her. There were giants. There were little tiny pygmies. There were half men, half goats. She sure hoped they didn't win. But they all came, and on the day that the competition would announce, the king came out to his balcony and said, pair off into partners, fight one another, and whoever wins that fight shall fight another one from a nearby fight. And so they began, and all over the kingdom, men, creatures, gods were paired off, trying to beat each other in battle so that they could marry the beautiful Deianira. Well, the fights went on day after day, all night long, until finally, 4 days later, there were 2 creatures standing at the base of the king's balcony. One was an Aeschylus. Aeschylus was the river god. Yes, he was a god in the Greek mythology. And Aeschylus was a very tall, slim man, and he had blonde hair and eyes of green like the grass that he flowed through. And he was very powerful. He could cut his way through all sorts of mountains. Several feet to his left stood the mighty Hercules. Now, you probably have heard a little bit, some about Hercules. Hercules was huge, but rather than tall and sinewy like Aeschylus, Hercules had huge, broad shoulders, brown, shaggy hair, hands as big as a basketball, mighty biceps, huge legs. And he looked up at the king and looked up at Deianira, and he knew he wanted very badly to marry Deianira. King Aeneas looks down and said, "Well, I see you two are ready to do battle. Let the battle begin." The men backed off a couple of spaces and then came running at each other. And they tussled and pushed and prodded and threw. And then Aeschylus backed off a little bit, and Hercules thought, what is this tricky guy doing? And he backed off and he came running at him. And just as he got there, he formed himself into a long green snake, the green like the color of his eyes, and he wrapped himself all around Hercules completely, and then he began to squeeze, trying to take the breath out of Hercules. But Hercules looked at him and thought, I can take care of this river. And with that, he burst his hands in his mighty arms, and he shoved Aeschylus out of the way. Aeschylus backed up a bit and thought, oh, I need something else. And so he called with a whistle 2 huge sea serpents, and their orange forms came gliding across the land, and they sat at Aeschylus's feet. And he said, squeeze that man to death. And they slithered rapidly toward Hercules. But Hercules thought, Aeschylus doesn't know me because I was born, and in my crib there were 2 cobras, and I wrestled them and threw them out of the crib dead. And of course, you've heard about the mighty Hydra, the most powerful snake in the whole world with 9 heads. And who beat it? I did. And as he watched those long river snakes coming toward him, he knew that they would try and wrap around his legs and wrap around his torso and squeeze him to death. And again, he let them start crawling up his legs. And they were crawling up. And then as they got up toward his hands, he merely grabbed them in each of his powerful hands, slung them around until they were all twisted into a rope, and threw it out to a ship that was docked on the side of the island. Aeschylus was furious. He backed off, and with a wave of his hands, he turned himself into the most mighty bull you've ever seen. A bull with a huge chest, and he had huge horns on either side of him, just huge, giant, sharp horns. And as the bull backed up, he began to paw the earth. He pawed so much of the earth that a mountain formed behind them. And then when it had gathered all its strength, it went running and running and running toward Hercules with its head and its mighty horns down, ready to pierce that giant of a man's heart. And as it came close and was ready to pierce him, Hercules grabbed a horn and ripped it off. Aeschylus immediately lost its power, and it slithered down into a brown river and made its way toward the ocean. Hercules stood with the horn in his hand, and he said, "King, I believe I have won." The king said, "Yes." And Deianira looked down and smiled at him because she really did love Hercules. Well, they were wed that afternoon, and Hercules brought back out the crown and he laid it on a beautiful platter. And he filled it with much of the fruit that came around. And you may think you've seen this symbol before. It is called the Horn of Plenty, or the cornucopia. And look this Thanksgiving on your table or in the decorations and see if you see the Horn of Plenty, and know that it came from the tale of Deianira, Aeschylus, and the mighty Hercules. Thank you very much. Are you ready after that Greek myth for another joke? Phew, good. Okay, remember, just kind of look like this, like you know the answer. Why did the farmer take a steamroller with one of those solid wheels, huge thing? Why did he take the steamroller and go over his crop of potatoes? He just ran all over the field. Why did he run a crop of potatoes down with his steamroller? Because he wanted mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving. Oh, how many of you like mashed potatoes? I do too. Now, I have a story called College Days. Some of your schools may actually do college days where everybody gets to dress up in the colors or the shirts or the jerseys of their favorite college teams. Well, this is a story about Domingo and college days. Domingo came from a very poor family, but he went to a good, caring school. And for weeks, they had been talking about college days because the school wanted everyone to grow up and be able to go to college. And they said, on next Friday, everyone gets to wear the shirt showing their favorite team. Well, when Domingo heard this, he went to his teacher, Miss Woods, and said, I know exactly what I'm going to wear. My favorite team is the University of Tennessee. And the University of Tennessee has orange, and I have an orange shirt, and I'm going to wear it. She said, oh, Domingo, that sounds great. Yes, University of Tennessee is very good. That night, Domingo went home and worked on his shirt, and he came back to school the next day, and he indeed was sporting an orange shirt. And on the orange shirt, he had taken and painted with some white paint the letters U and the letter T. So there was a big U-T on the shirt that he had painted. He was excited to show his teacher, and so when he got to school that day, he ran into Miss Wood's room and he said, look, I made my own University of Tennessee shirt. Isn't it cool? She said, you are so smart, Domingo. That is a great idea. Great way to make that shirt. And he was happy all morning. Lunchtime came, and she went down to the teacher's lounge, but then she came back a little early to get some things set up for the afternoon lessons. And as she walked into the almost empty classroom, she was surprised to see Domingo at the back of the room with his head down. She walked back and said, Domingo, do you not feel well? It's recess. And he looked up at her and he was crying. He said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And she said, why are you sad, Domingo? You said, some girls sitting at the table next to me made fun of my shirt. They said it was just cheap looking and that it wasn't a University of Tennessee shirt. And it really embarrassed me. Miss Woods put her hand around his shoulders and said, I like your shirt very much. Those are just mean girls who wanted to bully someone today, and unfortunately you were the one, but you're better than that. You can wear your shirt with pride the rest of the day. Well, Domingo sat pretty quietly at the back of the room all the rest of the day. And that afternoon, after all the kids had gone home, Miss Woods went in to see the principal. And she told her the sad story of Domingo. And the principal was very upset and thought, I will talk to some of those kids tomorrow that were being a bully. And she went back into her office and then remembered her friend Jerry, who she had gone to college with, and he had moved, and he was a college administrator. It's kind of like a big principal. He was a college administrator at, yep, you guessed it, the University of Tennessee. And she called him up and said, hey, I want to tell you this story. And she told him the whole story. Well, she, of course, never told Domingo that. But 2 days later, when Domingo got home, he walked into his apartment, and his mother said, Domingo, you have several packages over there, and they're all addressed to you. So Domingo was shocked, and he ripped the paper off of one and opened it up, and it was a real University of Tennessee shirt. And he dug further in the package, and there was a hooded sweatshirt that had the University of Tennessee on it. And there were a couple of more shirts in there. And then there was another box, and he ripped it open, and there was one of those fingers that said, we're number one. You know, they're made of foam. I bet you've seen those at games and stuff. We're number one. And it had a hat, which was sometimes used as the symbol for the University of Tennessee, particularly by the band. And it had a stadium blanket on it. It had all this stuff that, unbeknownst to him, the principal's friend had sent to him. Well, he was just thrilled. He was so excited. Of course, he went back wearing the real shirt, University of Tennessee shirt, to school the next day. Well, that Saturday, the story had gotten out about Domingo and the handmade University of Tennessee shirt, and the Tennessee band did an amazing thing. They usually wore orange uniform, orange coat, and they were looking very striking. But that day, they instead all had orange shirts and had made it to look like they too had painted the U and T on the shirt. And they performed at halftime on national TV. And the commentators on the show showed the band and showed them in their shirt. It went crazy throughout the country. It went all over YouTube. It was picked up by the national news things about the UT shirts that were handmade. People began to order that. They called the school and said, we want a shirt just like what you made for Domingo, like Domingo had. So they had to print up all these UT shirts. Another week passed and some of the excitement died down till another afternoon when Domingo got home from school. His mother said, Domingo, there's a letter here from the University of Tennessee, but it's addressed to me and your father. And Domingo said, well, let's open it. Let's open it quickly. And that letter was from the president of the university and said, dear friends, parents of Domingo, we wanted to let you know that we at the University of Tennessee would like to have Domingo attend college for free when he graduates from high school. He was being given a full 4-year scholarship to go to college. Isn't that an amazing story? But you want to know something even more amazing about it? Usually the stories that I tell you are fables or legends or just stories I find in books. But this story occurred last year in 2019, and it really did involve a little boy that lived in the South. His name was not Domingo because no one ever published his name. And he really did come to school one day wearing a UT shirt that he had made himself. And the band really did wear it for a national halftime show, and people all over the country really did order it. And so that is the story of one school's college days. Isn't that a great story? Let's end with a great joke. The last great joke is one girl was talking to another girl and she said, "Do you know why cranberries are red?" Her friend said, "No. Why are cranberries red?" She said, "Because he was embarrassed because he saw the turkey dressing." Turkey dressing. You've heard my story and you've listened very well. They are yours to tell. And so I hope you enjoy your holiday in a couple of weeks and stay safe and stay well. Goodbye. I'll see you next month.